My name is Isabella Stefanescu. Today is Monday, April the 10th, 2023, Easter Monday.
Can you show us where the spot is that you think the hole will be?
So at first we thought we would do this project in a garden, right? In somebody's garden. And then we thought, no, but we want people to see it as it's happening. It's a neighborhood park, people use it, and it would create a kind of casual encounter with a piece of art, with something happening, and kind of interesting conversations. This is actually one of the sand hills of Kitchener. There used to be a number of them. This is one of the last remaining sand hills, which are a geological feature. As a matter of fact, the community here used to be known as sand hills. And what we want to do is kind of really think about the environment here. We're starting in spring, things are starting to come out. And by the time when we finish the project, there's going to be snow on the ground again. And it's a way of getting very much in touch with nature and the earth and the plants and the sky and the stars in the city. So that's why we're here. I suppose the hole in the ground is a really kind of looking for roots. The moment when I thought this is my home, and it was my home when my mother was buried here. That's when you really feel as if a taproot goes down. Those are some things that we're looking for in the home, for roots, for meaning, for why you're here in this spot, in this city, this neighborhood.
I promised Isabella that I would document the hole, that over the course of the next 6 months, I'd watch 10 different artists as they spent time in creative residency making work in, near, and with this hole in the ground.
It's a land vote, right? So the water is inside and the land is on the outside. And as for the rest, people have to make their own story. The fencing always makes it into a bit of an art zoo. So you come and look at the art as if you were looking at it in a museum. Although a museum is more than an art cemetery. But this one, this is living art, it's an art zoo.
So twice a week over the course of the whole summer, I brought my kids down to the art zoo so we could hang out near a grave in a public park.
It's something that we're born with. As soon as a child is born, they start dying.
I wanted to self-therapy about maybe certain losses or things that were buried in my life. Originally, I was thinking about trying to invite a therapist to come and give me therapy right here in front of the hole. That sort of cultivated thinking process of maybe I could find a way to redeem myself through books and reading about this process, and maybe the therapist would come or not. And being out here in front of the hole and thinking about those types of sort of losses or grief or whatever, maybe I will interact with people. And sometimes it's strange, but strangers can be therapists in a way when we talk to each other, especially if you're not connected through family. So I thought I would bring my chaise lounge. It took me a long time to find this thing, a few months, and see what would come of in-depth reading and sort of contemplating the idea of loss. And who has the time to read and think about your own sort of grief or things that you grieve that have happened to you maybe in your life? It feels like there's never time enough for me to do that. And then when people come along, like someone did yesterday, I sort of shared what I was doing, and then there's this imminence to share from their point of view, and then I sort of sit in that chair and just listen, and made me feel like less alone in that process. For me, I think the fact that I hauled the chaise lounge on a wagon out along the sidewalk and all the way here, even that process feels strange, like I'm carrying my own therapy couch to the park, right? And I've never done anything like this before. This is sort of like new for me, right? Like, I was nervous that you're coming and I'm going to talk about this on camera. I'm like, oh, it feels like outside of the realm of the type of art that I've done in the past. But I think maybe it's a good thing. Maybe it's like I'm 45 and I'm ready to do that kind of art for me instead of just trying to whatever I was doing before. Every interaction is a test of, and I sometimes like do this when I write text work. I don't know what's the other half until later. This one I wrote this morning: after death, there is no more chances to make good to oneself. My number one surprise is like how that therapy couch has like some kind of magic. Like people come, they want to see the whole. Obviously, they want to see the whole, and then they come and they know that there's like a little project going on. And I always offer people to sit on the couch because it's like this cute little couch. And then as soon as people sit down, I sort of say how my initial idea was to come and give myself self-therapy through these books, but ultimately, I was just thinking about like the holes in my life. And then it's weird. I sometimes don't even say that. And people just share. The hole and the settee and the books were like the beginning of like a social practice experiment that sort of just naturally unfolded. And so I wanted to have like a text response to like the experience that I had of being here and like people being so awesome to like share and hang out with me and spend hours talking to me, which is like really beautiful because people don't seem like they're busy, right? And so my response to this experience, which is like the second last day, was I decided I wanted to do the just very simple, like, you changed me, I changed you. And this idea that we're influenced by each other, we're influenced by our experiences, we're influenced by the objects and the structures in our world too, and the way we perceive them. But I definitely think it's very relational. Life is very like, I'm a human and I'm very orientated around human relationships, if they're like brief or if they're long term or if they're like for a reason or a season. Like, it affects you and it changes your mind about the way you feel about things. So I feel like my experiences with people here at the Hole made me realize that there is something therapeutic about just being around other people and sharing stories.
I've been a huge fan of this hole for a year. It's such a simple gesture to have in public, but it is also so controversial and I think profound, to put a grave-like hole in a public park. It feels very exciting because it's so hard to tell how people are going to react, because it is, on the one hand, totally fair for the neighborhood to be very upset about this, but on the other hand, I think it's also fair to be excited about the possibilities there. So I like that. I like how macabre it is in this sort of bucolic Sandhills Park setting. I found the wordplay possibilities inescapable. I couldn't stop thinking of how to make a project out of, wordplay with the word hole. So most of my thoughts were consumed by the wordplay until I put the kibosh on that. And then the project I am going to do is essentially documentation for a failed play, where I am constructing a world where my great grandfather was the inspiration for Edgar Allan Poe's story A Premature Burial, about somebody who was so afraid of being buried alive that the fear itself kind of buried them and they couldn't live their life normally. And in the world of my play, his proto-psychiatrist suggested that he write a play about someone who was buried alive and wasn't that upset about it. And so I am going to find those documents and attempt to put on that play. So I will have all the trappings of a performance, but the performance is never going to actually happen. What gets passed down through families, what deserves to be lauded and respected and honored, and what doesn't, and sort of questioning our relationships to our ancestors and figuring out what's worth keeping and what's worth sloughing off. And then also elements of kind of intergenerational trauma and what, the good and bad things that get passed down and what we can do with, both of those things and how it affects who we are today. So hopefully something around that, something profound will come out of me not putting on a play. Since last time we spoke, I've named great-great-grandfather. His name's Yakov, and he met Edgar Allan Poe. When Poe was living in the Bronx, he wandered down to the Lower East Side, and they met, and Yakov explained his story of his being buried alive phobia to Poe, and explained also how his phobia was cured. And so Poe wrote A Premature Burial, and it just became this piece of family lore that, I would pull out at cocktail parties, or it was always my fun fact. And so I explain all of that in the video, and then I also explain that a year ago, while going through deceased grandparents' things, I found this box full of ephemera, and what it was Yakov's plans for a play that he was told to write by some proto-psychiatrist to help him get over his phobia. So the psychiatrist recommended that he try to write some fiction about somebody who gets buried alive but is not that upset about it. And so how Yakov interpreted that was that he decided to write some dialogue between twins that were buried alive but were not that upset about it, and he also wrote a song. And so I found all that, and I decided to sink a sizable chunk of my inheritance from this deceased grandparent into putting on this play and hopefully preserving my family's legacy. I collaborated with ChatGPT to help me write the old-timey stuff, like from 1842, what my great-great-great-grandfather would have written. So I asked ChatGPT to write me a song for two singers who were buried alive but happy about it.
Our final bed, for joy and peace within our heads.
So I was focusing a lot on the 2 weeks of this residency, the first beginning part being about death, the hole in the ground being what is to most people symbolic of death and burial and loss and grief. And then I wanted to transition into regeneration. And I thought, the most perfect way to do that is to have children lend their energy and their voices. And it changes immediately, which happened the other night. It's really beautiful. And now this week I move into birthing. So for the next two installations that I'm here, that's what it'll really present. I became disabled 7 years ago when rheumatoid came to me. I was bedridden for 3 years and was trying, different kinds of treatments, and nothing was really working. And now I'm on a drug called Rituxan, and it's like a chemo drug treatment that was developed in the early 80s for lymphoma patients. But it works, has positive outcomes for severe rheumatoid. It happened overnight, yeah. I lived in the bush. My husband Perry and I, we created a homestead and self-sufficient, growing all our own food, cutting all our own wood, 17 acres. So yeah, I've been very, very active in my life, and then it just happened, came to me. And you know, these diseases, these immune diseases, I mean, rheumatoid I always would have had, right? It just woke up. So now I work as a disabled artist, and I respect that term, and I like to say it out loud because I need to articulate what I need, to my community and to the artists that I work with now, because I don't work solo as an artist, I work as a team, right? So my capacity has changed greatly. So this idea of interdependence, which I've always upheld, is even more so for me, right? Because I need all of you to help me create and work at my practice. The scroll has been a part of the entire process, archiving and marking, information, art. And so I thought, that's what I'm going to do. And then people who come to the site will be able to express themselves on this scroll. And as I made the scroll, I realized we're still scrolling. It's still in our language. It's still in our consciousness. Just doing it a very different way. Community engagement has always been a really big piece of my work, having worked, 26 years in sexual violence in this country. Shelters and rape crisis centers and on the street and going into prisons. Yeah, there's just something so deeply rich, listening to people and having them, giving space for them to express, changes perspectives and experience immediately for me. The crone is the woman of age, wisdom, and power. She's been so disrespected and minimalized and completely left out of so much in this culture here in the West. And so there are many like myself who, create gatherings and rituals and ceremonies that really help women find honor and reclaim that kind of wisdom for themselves, So the last gathering on Friday night is about celebrating the crone. Birth, death, regeneration, all of it is one. One doesn't happen without the other.
Hey, Papa, may we go in?
You want to go in the hole, Wally?
Papa, let's ask.
It's a microphone. What did you say, Wall? You want to
We are going in.
go in where?
That.
All I knew was that a hole was being dug and that artists were coming and doing something, but I did not really understand what was being done or what the hole would be, if it would be left open. That was my main concern. Yeah, I live right there beside Sand Hills Park. Curious about the hole in general and how that relates to the art being made, I guess. I've never heard of that, so that interests me. I'm just interested to see what happens.
I actually thought it was a disgrace to put that, to do that. I really did. I would be way too embarrassed to do something and have people look at it and having to be identified of who you are, like what you did.
Because it's a grave, or just because it's not beautiful?
Just the way it's done. It's very tasteless.
Okay. And is that similar to how you feel?
Well, the same.
Yeah. Okay.
Why they do it?
Good question. Why they do that?
I was thinking of it as a grave, and being older, it was like, it'd be interesting to see what it'd be like to experience that. So I laid down in it today, and I felt how comfortable, and it was like Isabella says, it's like having your mother hold you. I'm kind of interested in see how the clouds flow by. The sides of the walls are so beautiful. We've just dug a fresh sides, so they're nice very nice earthy colors, and I want to kind of maybe experience that as a visual problem. How do you draw this? How do you paint this? How do you make it feel like one's lying in the hole in the ground? Can I draw that well, or can I draw? There's all that process stuff that you're meant to do. I guess you call it a meditation of some sort, just to experience the whole. I have a tendency to overthink things, so that means sort of that you kind of channel things because of your thoughts, and your thoughts create the piece. Let's say before you even started. I'm trying not to do that. I laid in a hole today, and Isabella was saying, "Isn't it like lying in your arms of your mother?" And I had to agree. It was just so comfortable lying in there. The sand is very soft. The hole was full of earwigs, so I sort of threw them out, mainly because they couldn't get out. They would climb up, and the sand would crumble, and they would fall back down. So I was trying to do them a favor, but who knows?
That's generous of you.
Well, it was either that or been eaten by ants, because there's red ants down there that were taking bites of them every so often, right? They're probably just waiting for them to get worn out. I'm realizing lately, more so than in recent history, is I'm kind of a speedy guy, so I like to paint quickly, and watercolor, when it's wet and damp and you're painting quickly, you get interactions happening because it's humid, and they're reacting to each other, and they sort of run into each other and maybe mix or do things. And so I was enjoying that. There's so much green here, and when you look at the trees, that every one of them's got something happening that varies from the next. Even some of the similar species, just the way they're sitting in relation to one's eyes, looking once more, west, and once more to the sun or whatever. And I find it's fascinating how complicated it is, and yet your eye is picking up all these nuances and trying to figure out how to get that down into paint or color I don't find easy.
These pictures that Robert made, I didn't see them until months later. At the time, me and the kids would just bike down to the park, and we would watch process. There was no product in sight. It was just artists and the whole, and it was very mysterious.
I'm one of these people that started to research about a year ago, and it's ongoing, and now that I'm here, I'm collecting materials. Right now I'm working with writer. I often work with scientists and ecologists. That's coming. Probably geologists. That's coming. And I like to spread the material, put it up on the wall and start to spread it out and see what floats to the top. So looking at the geology of it, looking at where it's situated, the idea that it's urban. One of the things that the whole really made me think about was landscape. What did that mean to me? How did it fit into the way that I thought about myself as an artist? What did it mean to be in the hole? And when I started looking at the materials of things like Schneider House, which was close, and then started looking at the creek and what that meant, I'd like to look at this not from the viewpoint of people. I'd like to look at this from the viewpoint of the creek. I'd like to look at this more as something where the creek has a voice, not in the way that we expect or assume, that it can express those things in its history and tell its story in a different way. So it's not really about humans. Indirectly it is. We're the agents that have often done things, for example, to the creek, to the land around. but I don't think that the story that I want to tell is necessarily about that. And the ultimate end result of everything, the sort of unfolding of Creek's story, will take the form of a graphic score.
For musicians.
Can be musicians, it's been sound artists as well, have used it, but yeah, most likely for musicians. As a non-musician, I make these type of works for musicians. We just walked along Schneider Creek from where the hole is at Sandhill Park all the way down to Schneider House. And because I'm not from Kitchener, it's on Queen Street.
Yeah.
Okay. And I had asked if there were any small museums or sites around that are historical in nature that I could start to mine information from. And she brought up Schneider House, and then I started to look at the pictures and I saw pumps. And I'm interested in agriculture, and I'm interested in how we change landscapes. And so I started thinking that if there's a pump and a spring house, then there's water. And if there's water, where is it? And what's happened to it, and what is the history of how it's been managed in that time? So I decided that I wanted to investigate the point of view of Schneider Creek from its history and also from the point of view of the creek. I've been trying to think about, if I look at the agency of the water itself, how has it changed over time compared to when it ran down and in front of Schneider's house? And how would that look? And I guess I've been really thinking of it as the other events as being footnotes, really, to the history of the creek. For the creek itself, it's not the primary story. And so that's what I want to look at.
Working in the landscape teaches me a great deal about limits and about relationships. This hole is really interesting to me. When I was first approached by Interarts Matrix to come here, it seemed fairly apparent that it was a grave-like space that was going to be created. And a lot in broad strokes, my practice has always been about belonging and relationship. What does it mean to be emotionally attached to a place? What does it mean to have an effective relationship with a particular place? That becomes very complicated as a settler. But people have attachment. And so it's one of those things where, well, you're born here, you live here, you die here, or not. But what does it mean to return to the earth? This is your final resting place. So I was thinking about that in terms of my own parents, and the fact that they're immigrants, and well, my dad is an immigrant, my mom was born in Canada, 2 immigrant parents. But where would they want to be buried? They were both, they both passed on, and they were both cremated. But I know it sounds a little morbid, but I have their urns, and I've held on to them for years because I didn't know where they wanted to be, or even if they wanted to be together, to be honest. So that was informing my thinking when I came here. The other thing that's been informing my thinking is the relationship to the earth that we have in urban settings, where things are paved over, there's a lot of concrete, there's obviously a lot of houses, a lot of buildings, lots of infrastructure. And what does it mean to dig in the dirt and place things there, place bodies there, or change the landscape or alter the landscape? What lies just beneath the surface is always an interesting thing to start to look at. There's this amazing stratified, there are different colors in the sandy soil here. It's beautifully stratified. It looks kind of like an abstract painting already. But there's been a lot of rain here, and most of that was obscured by the rain. So when I was here at the beginning of this week, on Monday, I got down in the hole and took some soil samples because I want to make, I'm experimenting with making pigment with the different colored soils to see what I can draw or see how I can think through a relationship to this bit of earth that I've never been to before. When I was working at the hole over the last couple of weeks, I took samples of the different colors of soil that you can see in the walls of the hole. They're very different colors. And I started making the pages of a little book. It is a grave-like space, but it's also a container, it's a vessel, and it obviously is porous and permeable, and so it is also part of all of those cycles, the literal hydrologic cycle that we're experiencing right now, but it is also emblematic of all the cyclicity that has to do with birth and death and regrowth, or using fragments of maps and things like that, because there's both graphic information and verbal information there. And I find that fascinating, that the way we translate back and forth between the visual and symbol systems, and how language as a symbol system also has this visual capacity and can be used in interesting ways. It can be spatialized just like other visual information. There hasn't been enough time. There's just no way. 2 weeks was not enough.
So the hole in the ground, to me, is like it's negative space to a degree. It's a space that's been created where we assume solidity. I'm not sure what that means yet, but it's also inhabiting a place. So now we have this space in this place. And it signifies many different things. I mean, the first thing it signifies, which I think everybody agrees with, and is kind of like the opener, is it signifies a grave, because it's exactly the size of what a grave would be. I'm treating this week as an unfolding and trying different things. So I'm trying both aesthetic interventions with social experiments to see what lands, because I really just don't know yet. And also confronting the logistics of what it takes to be in a public space it's public. So how do we create intimacy, or how do we extend invitation? And I'm just trying to keep a curious mind about who comes and interacts with me, or the people that I bring to collaborate with around the hole in the ground. We're going to potentially create a memorial with names of people that we know from the homeless communities in the area.
It's really important to memorialize and remember people that sometimes become very invisible. I think we lose our humanity when we think in those ways. It is so deeply inhumane to tell anybody they cannot rest.
Well, I will be telling my experience with these people who died, but they died fighting, and that's what's important, that their presence has left the world as a better place. Dave Taylor, a week later, he was an anarchist, he's dead now, he said, I'm part of a group that we just started called Anti-Racist Action, which is now known as Antifa, whatever. Would you like to join? What do? We fight Nazis. I'm like, cool, I'll join. I fucking hate Nazis. So Dave's dead.
To see a couch out of context in front of a hole it was interesting. So this one woman who lives in the neighborhood came by, and that's what I was hoping for. I was hoping to attract people just wandering by and them getting a chance to interact and have conversations. And I wanted to talk about homelessness should it come up. So this one woman sat on the couch and immediately told me she had been homeless and had been living at St. Mary's. So I ended up interviewing her because part of my practice is a theater, but a media practice as well. So I was like, I guess I'll use the tools I have. Some of the other artists are so much more organic, and I'm jealous of them. But I use the tools I have. So I sat with her, and she told me her story. Because really all these things are just prompts to start conversations, which is part of the research when you're a dramatist. Homelessness in my background is real because when my daughter was 5 weeks old, we became homeless. There is a reality to being unsheltered that is real and very, 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 very intense. When contemplating my own feelings of uprootedness, displacement, or a lack of home, it really does relate to the politics from where I'm from. In this last 6 months, we had to go through another tribunal to determine whether or not we're legitimately Algonquin or not. And also the idea of an opening. Wherever there's a closing, there's also often an opening. And so those kind of converging at the same time. And I'm finding it fascinating since I've been here how things are growing out of the dirt pile.
And I thought, let me do a film. I see this as a portal.
Okay.
Between life and afterlife. It's that strange place that you're not in the afterlife, but you're also no longer in life. So it's just that space where you contemplate both spaces, because in the story, this woman has to decide if she wants to go into the afterlife or go back to life. And because of her trauma, she thinks she wants to go back into the afterlife. But as we discover in the end, she also discovers herself and decides that she actually does have a love for life and she wants to live. So I think it's at the point where, and it's also about suicide as well. The topic of suicide, people don't talk about that a lot. What makes a person get to the point of deciding to give up their own life. I wanted to do a lament, actually, almost like a short of a woman just lamenting at the whole about life and death and mortality and trauma and sickness. And then I realized that the whole fit into a film I had been struggling with, a story I'd been struggling with, about a woman who goes into the afterlife and is trying to find her way back. And then I saw the whole and it fit perfectly. I just felt like this film has always been made for this. And so I decided to make a film. It was initially supposed to be a short, but the story has grown and expanded so much that now I think it's heading into being a feature. It is going to be a feature. But I was able to do, because it's a feature and I couldn't pull it off within the time frame of being at the whole, I decided that the best way to use the whole to enhance the story was to do two table reads. So instead of having the traditional table reads of having actresses sit around and read the script and act it out just so you have an idea, I had women from all over, like different places, different walks of life, come in to read the script, because in the end they are the audience, and I wanted more of audience engagement than dealing with actresses in that sense, because actresses will give you an artistic, they're used to dealing with material, but I wanted women who don't deal with material on a daily basis to give me feedback. And the feedback was phenomenal. For me, it was a huge success because the story was able to, I found out that there were parts of the story that I was afraid to write, maybe because it came too close to home for me. It was a little bit too personal, but I think from the first read and then the second read, I was able to shed all fear and just write that story. this story was born out of many things. My personal struggles with my family, my personal struggles with trauma, my personal struggles with religion. I was raised with religion, and I found out that, well, for me personally, I don't know about anybody else, but for me, I became a fearful adult, fearful and guilt-ridden adult. I was always praying for forgiveness for sins I didn't know what everything felt like it was bad. I was always afraid, especially when they tell you, oh, if you don't pray, then the enemy is going to come. And I'm like, but why do I have to keep praying every single day? If the God I serve is not strong enough to keep the enemy at bay permanently, then why do I need to? So it was constant fear. And then one day I just said, you know what, screw this, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not gonna live in fear anymore. Like, there are people who walk around atheists, agnostics, and they don't have to fear for their lives, and they're carrying on with their lives. I want to be able to carry on with my life.
So what we're doing is we're basically paying attention to what is right here. So the hole is here. As I've been sitting, I've been noticing ragweed up under the white pine. And so up to this point, I've mainly been drawing pictures of the hole. And there's something very poetic about a hole in a park. And all my drawings, because there's nothing around the hole, sometimes the hole turns into a bed or it floats. And I should also say that I don't normally draw. So part of this project was like just sitting here and paying attention to what's right here and drawing it, using some kind of mark making. So do you want to hear about the other hole?
Yeah, I guess let's tell me about the other hole. It turns out Linda had dug a different hole some years earlier back home in Saskatchewan, and that art hole had actually been the inspiration for this current art hole.
It started being a science experiment because there was a man in the 30s who did something similar because he was trying to figure out how to get rid of the native grassland and grow crops. And throughout the University of Saskatchewan, his roots are framed and they're like 6 feet deep. And so I researched him and decided I would do that. So that's how I dug the first hole. I got funding to replicate that. And I got this beautiful hole, and I was just like, and I was supposed to like take all the roots out. And I just like, I can't do that. I just want to be in the hole. So that was that hole. And there's the same hole. Then I was invited to do a show about the hole. And so I did drawings and I did video, I did photography. And it wasn't right. Like I knew that it wasn't satisfying. So I was telling someone that I was going to, cancel it. And I said I just wanted to be in the hole. And sometimes you say it out loud, like you say the most obvious thing. And so that's when I decided I would sit in the hole by myself and live stream to the gallery, which was in Saskatoon. And I didn't know at the time, but there's no internet in the hole to begin with. But I was telling, so various people said, oh, can I come and read to you or sit with you? And so that's when we did the residency. And so I was in the hole for 65 days. And each person came and sat with me or did whatever they did for 6 hours every day. So I'd say that there is a central part to death in my thinking, and it's about the time. And when you do a drawing, even if you just do one line, that's like a mark of time. And what I realized I wanted to do is create marks of time, but not have the drawing be an artifact that you valued. It's much more evidence that, that time's passed, and what is just flowing to you these are all the drawings, and they're all wrapped up. Is there enough? So instead of having, I wanted so that these drawings There is no invitation to open this, but this is like evidence that somebody sat and marked. So it's like these are minutes, these are moments, and they're moments in your life, and the moments that end with the grave. Part of marking time is marking the end of time. All around us is that presence of change and of time passing. And I guess I think about, how do we become aware of that? And we tend to become aware through trauma or crises. So I'm part of an after suicide group, and the issue of time is, or the absence of time, is like an ongoing conversation, and the sort of the effect of not having any time left. And then of people who are terminally ill, that's another point of having an extra refined version of time. And I think the rest of us go along sort of naively not paying attention to time.
I thought I'd have this close-up view of the whole, be able to watch how it changed, watch how the artists change. Hell, maybe even I would be changed by the process. But it's hard to see the change as it's happening. Even with the benefit of distance and time, it's slippery. Like, I can kind of see my kids growing. I can kind of see the seasons changing. But can I see the moment of artistic transformation? It's slippery.
We basically spent the summer here until today, taking turns, 2 weeks and 2 weeks and 2 weeks, 10 artists. So it's been in total 23 weeks in the 23rd year of the 21st century. Well, today we bring summer.
So the summer will be
returned. Yes. So we're going to return the 540 pounds of soil that we took out of the hole, sand and topsoil, and we're going to have this patch of earth regenerate. Within the soil will go our time capsule, something that we hope somebody will dig out quite a few years from now, in 2050. It was a question when we didn't know who would survive the pandemic, whether we as people or the things we have built or arts organizations or the world as we know it. So thinking of a time out and this idea of a resting place, because inevitably blue, that's where we are going to end up, whether in a hole or in the smoke or whatever, the hole in the clouds. And we had this kind of engagement, 3, 4, 5 people, sometimes even a dozen a day. And some of the conversations were deep. I would say, in some ways, that was a bit of a creative conflict, in the sense that you cannot always make art if you're actually having a conversation about art. So how the various artists navigated that was very much part of the project. I think most of the audience was puzzled. I had one man quite aggressively stop and say, "Why a hole?" And this was during Linda Duval's residency. I was there, a bit of a buffer so she could work. And I engaged him and I told him, why a hole? Why a hole? Because we have to talk about those things. We have to talk about mortality. Somebody's got to talk before you actually have to. And very soon I had his whole life story, including severe brushes with mortality in his own life. So it's that kind of very serious conversation that happened here outside the open sky. And where else does it happen? Perhaps in the church? I mean, I don't think even in the church. We have to create those spaces where those conversations have to take place. I think what this project underlines is death is part of our lives.